Okay, welcome back. It's time to start the panel discussion. Let's see. Will we be able to spotlight all panelists simultaneously, or do we spotlight them?
One moment.
Okay. Okay, in the meantime, I'm going to tell you that if you have questions during this panel discussion for the panelists, to please write them in the Q&A box. If you are yourself in this meeting as a panelist, you will not be able to write in the Q&A box, but if you write in the chat box, then someone will make sure it ends up in the Q&A box. So this means you can ask specific question to a specific person, but also more general questions that maybe multiple persons in the panel can respond to. And I wanted to mention here also that after this session ends, there is a possibility to stay here in this Zoom call to have a little bit of an informal mingle, to chat a little bit more together. So panelists, welcome. Thank you for being here. We have, I think we will have many questions from the audience. We as consortium members also have many questions for you. And we've also had a bit of a brainstorm session beforehand, so some questions might not come from the Q&A box, but they are questions that came up during our own discussions as a consortium. And if you want to speak, you can use the raise hand button, or, well, you can just raise your hand, I guess. That also works. So, I want to start actually with a question that is currently in the Q&A box. Wait, I'm not going to start with the Q&A box question just yet, because I'm going to say that my name is Meerte Pleisier, and I am from the Eindhoven University of Technology. Originally in the program, it says Jarek Urbanski would be chairing this session. And due to unforeseen circumstances, unfortunately, he could not be here. So I will do my very best to step in and lead this discussion. So then let's go to the Q&A box. And the question that is in there is, what I see is that software for assistive purposes is often available to the public, but it often comes with the need to have special hardware that is not easily available to users. How can we minimize this problem? So any of you have ideas on this? Have you encountered this problem maybe?
Well, maybe Meerte, I can start by just saying that over the last 30 years, we have seen a lot of dedicated technologies for assistive technology that have moved into the mainstream, and that is actually, the goal of all this. As much as we can move technologies in the mainstream, we're really happy with that because it serves our customers better. The iPhone is a great example of that. I think with VoiceOver, they have, for vision impaired people, they have really made it work for this device. So this is a mainstream device, not a dedicated device, and software works on it. So many of the software that the applications that are for iPhone are free. So that's actually a very good way of accessing and making software available to everyone. Now, when you talk about some aspects like Braille, for example, or tactile devices, the markets are so small for those devices that mainstream are not interested in manufacturing or designing those devices. So I think assistive technology is always, for the last 35 years, has always been very central for many users. And maybe 10% of it or 20% of it has moved to mainstream. And if all products were made accessible from the start, it would be great. But there will always be, I think, some aspects, some technologies that will remain in the hands of specialized manufacturers like us, and labs and research centers to really work on it, because mainstream will not be interested.
Can I add to that a little bit?
Please.
It was great, great explanation about. I once gave a talk that accessibility is becoming mainstream, and Giles sort of echoed that in his talk there. One thing I will say about the iPhone as well is that when it was designed, I mean, Apple really did a good job of trying to make it compatible with existing devices, Braille devices. And the cost of Braille devices is going down to some degree. So you can buy, years ago, the cheapest professional Braille device that you could carry around was like $5,000 US. And now you can get one for maybe 800 or maybe even less, 500. I mean, the Braille displays are smaller, but the fact that they automatically tether to the iPhone and stuff like that just makes it much, much better. So I think things are getting better. Like as said, special purpose devices like Braille displays or Braille devices will always be, sort of niche and not a mainstream. But the more and more that becomes mainstream, the cheaper it gets and more people will be able to use it. There's also the training issue that with these new technologies like the iPhone that came out, deaf blind people couldn't use them initially because they need to be taught how to do it. And so there was a cost to that as well. In the United States, that was covered by something called the National Deaf Blind Equipment Distribution Program. But then a deafblind person would have to be aware of that and so on. And so there is a lot of human support that's needed to use this technology.
Thank you. Danielle, did you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think those are all really wonderful points. What this question made me think of was actually the maker community. So I think that access to hardware and is a huge problem. It's a particularly important problem when we're, for example, networks of people with 3D printers have sprung up. So even if you don't have a 3D printer yourself, maybe someone in your neighborhood is able to print something that would be of use to you. There are things like Arduinos that let you connect circuits and build things yourself. So I think this is one method that the community has come up with.
Thank you. Gilles, please go ahead.
So, those things make me think of two important points that we have not discussed thoroughly during the presentation. One is Richard's point about training on mainstream devices, but the global point of training is extremely important in this field. And I think when I look at the Suitcase project and I look at what you have done, which is very inspiring for us as manufacturers, but one of the major hurdle that you're going to face in terms of distribution of this device is training the users. The users will have to learn the signs and the way, to feel the tactile vibrations and all that. And this is not a simple task. We have seen so many of these in the past where the learning experience was so difficult that people would not go through it and would abandon the product instead of going for it. So don't underestimate the training effort that will be required to get the product in the hands of deafblind people and all this. The other quick point that I want to make, but that's very central and very frustrating for manufacturers, very often when we see research projects from universities or research centers, they announce, for example, that Braille is now very affordable, and it's only a few $100s instead of a few $1,000s. And I think you have to understand the dynamics and the difficulties that companies are facing, the manufacturers, in a very, very niche market. The number, I mean, Apple produces millions of iPhones per week, and there's zero product in assistive technology that has produced 1 million units over 30 years. So the dynamic is not the same at all. And so just to explain quickly, when we talk about the cost of goods sold, which is what you would do with Suitcase, you would probably add up the cost of each item that needs to be put into the device or the system. And you'd say, well, if it costs $100, why don't we sell it for $125? The reality is companies have, first, distribution network. We've talked about training costs and launching a product. And you will figure out, we give about 25 to 35% discount on the product. So if you sell a product at $1,000, there is about, let's say, $300 that goes into the hands of the distribution network. And then you have to think of all the costs you incurred, the R&D costs, the selling costs, the management costs, the after sales costs. All this needs to be taken into account. And a company like us, we need to make a profit at the end of the day. So all this to say, and I have a little table in front of me that I can share with you. But basically, in this example that I made, if you have a $300 cost, you will have to sell the product at $1,000 to cover the cost and the distribution margins and everything. So keep in mind that this is, when you announce a price or you talk about the cost of a product as a researcher, you will just evaluate the cost of the prototype. But there are many other costs that needs to be taken into account before announcing a retail price.
Yeah, thank you, Gilles. This is something really, well, at least I can say from a scientist perspective, you don't often think about how incredibly expensive something will become to actually sell and have it still be commercially interesting. And I'm wondering, actually, maybe Dick or Erik can comment on this, because you have some technology that you have partially developed in-house also, that you make available for your clients. How do you do that?
Shall I answer it, Erik? Actually, we are a non-profit organization, and we prefer always not to develop solutions. Actually, that is our last resort, like what we told in our presentation also. But when there is not, when there are no ready-made solutions, then we always try to develop it ourselves, and mostly we do it in co-creation with universities or students, and we have in our lab, we have in-house also technicians, and we have a foundation, the Bartimeus Foundation, who also puts money aside and to make these developments possible.
But it's always a problem to be able to produce products you developed. Mostly you make them for one question only, and when you want to make it that will be useful for other people, that it's very hard to find companies who want to produce or to participate in this.
And the easiest things to develop are web products, but as soon as there is something you have to produce to then it becomes difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, because software is easy to distribute, I guess. Yeah, yeah. So a bit related to this, there was a question by Ray, one of our consortium members. He says, I think the maker community is an important focus. One of the questions is that has been in my mind in the Suitcase project is what we can do to best make the results of this and other projects available and useful to the maker community, or for instance, possibly the Fab Lab. For example, are there any good practices we could adopt or things we should avoid? I guess to be able to reach the maker community where other people will start to make things as well, based maybe on Suitcase developments. Do any of you have ideas on this? I guess it relates a little bit to what Danielle said about maybe someone has a 3D printer, right?
Yeah, I can chime in a little bit. So I know for other types of devices that people have tried to get makers engaged in creating. If there's a set of instructions for creating it that can be disseminated, that can be very beneficial so that each person doesn't have to figure out how to create the product themselves. You know, if there are a specific template to put into the 3D printer, for example, that can be very helpful. I think just the more information is available to people in the more formats, probably the better. I mean, I think you're all doing a wonderful job with this consortium, for example, you know, making things available publicly online, making templates and as much code and infrastructure as is possible to share, I think gives people the best opportunity to recreate some of this and adopt it themselves.
Maybe I can, oh, go ahead.
Okay. Now, I think, as we mentioned in our presentations, we try to exchange all kind of developments, and we have made a small network, Deafblind International Technology Network, so we can exchange ideas and exchange prototypes. So that might also be helpful to develop new things.
Gilles, please go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, a couple of ideas on that. I think we have to look at the market as multi-layered, and I think there's a space for everyone. So when you look at the commercial layer, we have to, I think it's very good when a product can become commercial, because then it creates innovation, it creates support for the users, it creates an environment that makes this product successful for the end user. Now, when a product, because it's too niche, and as was said before, that there's only a couple of users that will use this product, then I think specialized organizations and non-for-profit organizations are the ones that have to take over and give the service and give the, you know, provide the product, because commercial companies cannot afford to do that. They would disappear. But when we can bring a product to a successful commercial level, then, as I said, it creates innovation. It creates more ideas and ways of solving the problems. And I do recognize that deafblind, the deafblind community is a small community. And but again, I think it's always better when the manufacturing and the support and the innovation is taken over by the commercial manufacturers. But there are clearly, I mean, things that make it that the commercial environment cannot take it over, and it has to go to the non-for-profit sector, which, I mean, is an absolute necessity and doing a great job, and it's through donations, through I mean, funding programs, the government funding programs, that other ideas are created. And this other level, I think, is extremely important to serve the deafblind community.
Thanks. We have Russ Palmer here who joined us. He wants to ask a question. So Russ, please go ahead.
You want me?
No, you can talk.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes. It's
Yes.
Russ Palmer. I'm deafblind with Usher's syndrome, and I'm using social haptic communication. But my question specifically, originally I was in computers, and for many years now I've noticed that some of the platforms like Zoom and Teams, they don't seem to appreciate that when you're trying to find where to unmute or turn your video off, they always put it in the middle of a screen. It'd be so useful if they put it to the left side or some dedicated side so people are aware, I can just run my finger down, because I can't see anything at all. And I find it amazing how some manufacturers don't consider this, particularly those who can't see. And also there may be other implications if some people want to use Braille or any sort of other facilities. Again, it's all going back to the beginning. Like, I know that the Mac people, iPads and so on, they developed their software from the beginning and they had the voiceover, and that's been extremely useful. And for me, I use that all the time. And it would be nice if manufacturers can consider the end user at the beginning so they don't have to change everything at the end. That's really my comment.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I think that part of the fault of this is that I'm an educator at the University of Washington, and I'm sure there's a lot of educators on this call. Is if you look at, for example, computer science education, there's very little in computer science education that talks about accessibility. So when these graduates go into industry, you know, they don't even think about it. They don't think about all the possible end users. And there's an organization in the United States called Teach Access, which was founded by people at Facebook, Google, and some other, Microsoft, and some of the bigger companies. And they're trying to change that landscape. And it's a slow process to try and get, you know, computer science departments or information science departments to sort of change and include accessibility as part of the curriculum. So I think you know, it's a long-term solution, but eventually one would hope that that students that come out of programs will have much more knowledge about accessibility and be able to, you know, sort of put that into the products. You know, we call it born accessible. If it's born accessible, then that makes it, you know, accessible from the very beginning. Now realize that the iPhone was not born accessible. It was only, I think, in iOS, I think 5 or 3 or something like that, that they got voiceover in. So you might not be aware of that, but it's kind of great that it's not quite born accessible, but almost born accessible.
This reminds me of, so some people have the philosophy that if you make something accessible, it actually becomes more useful for everybody, not necessarily only for people with sensory loss. And related to that, I saw a question coming up in our brainstorming session, actually, what is your vision of assistive technology? Will it be in a form where things just become accessible to everybody, or will it stay sort of a specialized product for a specific group of users? Do any of you have ideas on this? Gilles?
Well, I believe that, as I said before, that there will always be a need for specialized companies to really help with the residual that that is not taken care of by the mainstream. But keep in mind, and I would encourage all of the mainstream companies to do all of the efforts to build born accessible software and devices. But the reality is that what drives companies is the size of the market, the additional sales they will do with this. And unfortunately, deafblind and blind and low vision community doesn't make it. It's too small a market for those big companies. And although I praise Apple and I think Microsoft has done some great work as well, I think it was to be a good corporate citizen. It was not driven by a good reason. It's to be a good citizen that they did this. And I think in our community, for example, Apple is recognized as being the perfect example. And I say to people, they're not an example. They are an exception because very few companies really take it seriously. So how can we drive more companies to do it, to create more accessible products? That's a lot of advocacy, a lot of work. And I like Richard's idea. I mean, if you create this incentive in education, you're going to get more engineers, more software developers to really do it from the start. But it is an enormous problem, and because most companies are driven by the amount of sales they do, and we're a small business for that.
Thank you, Gilles. There was also a question now in the Q&A box, and it's about artificial intelligence. It says, do you think artificial intelligence can support training? We usually see artificial intelligence as being unfair to users with disabilities, but it could potentially be used in favor of people with disabilities too. Yeah, who would like to say something about the use of artificial intelligence? Maybe also related to privacy. For instance, it came up, privacy came up in Anna's talk and also Danielle's talk. The use of artificial intelligence will come with collecting large sets of data. So yeah, please, Anna.
Yeah. No, but it's a very interesting area. And I mean, it's an area where lots of companies and also actually even countries are putting quite a lot of resources into. I believe, I mean, artificial intelligence will be what we make it to be, or what to say. And from a commercial perspective, I think, Gilles, you have been very good in presenting this again and again, that if we are able to produce a product as a commercial company that has a big enough market, then that will happen. Within artificial intelligence, we can see that you're starting off with some real expert areas. From my perspective, I see it's happening a lot in image recognition to read X-rays and so on. And of course, this knowledge can very well be utilized also in this context. So I think artificial intelligence will be actually a tool that can be utilized definitely to achieve things. When it comes to privacy and data, I think this is going to be one of the hurdles in the future. We can see already today with the EU regulation on this area and compared to, for instance, now the US, where we are having a situation where the US is not considered to have a strong enough data protection legislation, that is actually stopping quite a lot of good initiatives. And we see these things where the individual, the person, is not really the owner of his or her own data, and cannot fully actually utilize the data. And I think we're having quite a lot of obstacles there that we will have to deal with, because from a individual perspective, very often we would want to use the data much more than we are allowed to today. At the same time, we don't want it to be abused. And I think we have to find somehow the balance here also in the European context.
have a few comments about artificial intelligence. And, artificial intelligence is one of those well, it's a technology that's, changing over time. It's not the same as it was, 25, it goes back, 50 years when I started my work in computer science. And there's always been, this sort of level of hyperbole or hype about artificial intelligence solving all these problems. And there have been these successes, chess. Okay, they solved chess. They can do speech recognition fairly well. We saw that today with our automatic captioning, but it never got the word protactile correct, in the automatic translation. So it's, there's a long way to go. So I wouldn't, bank on that. And the question also was about training. And if you're going to do training with deafblind people, honestly, it should be face-to-face and in their language, something that they already know. You have to build on what they already know. So if it's protactile, they know. If it's, Libris, tactile Libris, or whatever it is that they already know, you got to build on that and then do the training on whatever the new technology is and so on. It's not something that artificial intelligence is going to do. Artificial intelligence has been basically a failure in translating sign language. It hasn't worked yet. And I don't know if it'll ever work. It's a long road there. So don't just believe all the hype about artificial intelligence is my advice.
It's not a magical solution. I don't know. I think Gilles was first and then Danielle.
Okay. I just want to say, and I agree with you, Richard, but I certainly believe that artificial intelligence is the next big step in assistive technology, especially for the visually impaired. And I don't know the deafblind market as much, so I will not pronounce myself on that. But the two big things that are working with deep learning and those things is computer vision and natural language recognition. And I think those two things are critical to what we're doing, what we've been doing for 30 years. So instead of using algorithms to do OCR, we're now using artificial intelligence, and the results are much better and faster. And object recognition was not possible some years ago. Now it's possible. Scene description is now possible. Just to give you one little example we've succeeded in, AI is like OCR has been 30 years ago, and GPS has been, solving a lot of problems for those people. So we're seeing those big steps, and I think AI is the next one. And my example is we've been using GPS on a device called Trek, and the Trek is great to bring you from point A to point B. So you're in front of a building, we know where you are, but we don't have a clue where the door is for you to enter the building. And these last 40 feet to get to the building is an incredible difficulty for blind people. And we've gathered 10,000 images of doors and civic numbers beside the doors. And what we were able to do, we now have about 87% recognition of those doors and the civic numbers. So when a user enter a civic number on the street, then we can bring them to the door itself directly, instead of just bring them within 40, 50 feet of where that door is. And it will take them 15 minutes to find the door. So that's just one example. It took us about 6 months to take the pictures, transform them, put them in through an AI system, and get the system working and recognizing in real time those pictures that we take in the street. So that's one example, but there are many like this. I think we're going to see. But you're right; it's extremely slow. We started 4 years ago, and when we started, I said to my people, if we have not a product on the market within 3 years, those companies that will not have a product within 3 years will be out of business. And I was completely wrong. We're 4 years down the road, and I don't foresee any real solid products around AI within a 2 year time frame, 2 to 3 year time frame now. Still, so I said that 4 years ago, but I'm still saying that, so maybe I'm wrong again. so that the progress is slow, and it's a new tool, it's a new environment. We have to learn to use it.
Danielle, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think I agree with what everyone has said in different pieces. I think AI will continue to evolve and be increasingly useful, but I also don't think it's some magic pill that's going to solve all of our problems. So I think there's some truth in both views. Going back to the question about using AI for training, I do think that it will be possible to do more and more with AI for training. There's already some success in this space, for example, with teaching people to do gestures that are important for different sports or music, including in the accessibility space. And I predict that there will be more successes in this space. One major problem, though, with using AI for accessibility is that you need a lot of data to train your models, especially if you want to use deep learning or some of the more recent, more powerful methods. And collecting a large volume of data from a very small community is hard, right? It's hard to collect enough data from the mainstream. If you really need data from a small user group, even fewer of whom are using your particular product or tool, it can be really hard to get enough data. And then privacy concerns also become amplified when you're working with a smaller group, especially around a sensitive identity. So I think there are a lot of challenges to employing AI in this domain specifically, but I suspect that there might be some clever solutions that appear. But again, it won't be some magic solution that solves everything.
Gilles, did you want to react to this? Oh, no, I thought you had your hand raised, but maybe that was still from.
Well, I just want to say, Danielle, that I mean, we've participated in it's not organized, but there's this Orbit project that is, I think, led by the University of London City University, I think, and I know Microsoft is involved as well. So that's, you're absolutely right. Gathering the data will be completely the biggest task, but there are people that are working and sharing, and we want to share everything we have, and we want to be able to take everything that everybody has. So sharing all of these specific accessibility data, I think, will be extremely important.
We have about 5 minutes left in this session. There is here a remark, or actually a question from Joanna, one of our project partners. And she asks, if the road to commercialization of this product will be expensive and there will be no investors, who will be able to invest in this product? Do you see any other opportunities in making the project results available and usable so that others can benefit from the project results? And this is, of course, related to the point where we are in Suitcase at this moment. We don't really have a product, but we want our work to be usable. Yeah, do any of you have ideas of possibilities of doing this?
Well, as I said, I think if I mean, Humanware, what we would do typically with this, we would take the idea, but we would build a business case for it. And if it makes it, so it has to do with the price point, with the cost, with the margins, with the size of the market. And we evaluate all this. And at the end, if it makes sense and we believe there's a market, we believe our distribution network is well aligned for distributing such a product, then we would invest into making this product a viable commercial product. Now, it might be that the market is too small. And if it is, I think then it's it's non-for-profit organizations or government funding that should bring this product to the market.
And for instance, I'm thinking maybe Dick and Erik have ideas on this. For instance, what if we have, for instance, software that we have developed that could be developed further? For instance, is it something like what FabLab would think, like maybe we have a client that something like the Suitcase, like a part of Suitcase would be useful for? Would that be something that you would then take and maybe develop or tailor further for your needs?
I think it would be very important for us to get hold on the project's results, and that we could also, if the results would be available, and also you made some prototypes in Suitcase, if we could borrow them and that we could build further on them, that would be a great help. So then it would maybe solve a problem of one of our clients. I think that would be very nice.
Yeah, so that would not make it widely available to everybody, but that would be a non-commercial way, maybe, to make use of our results.
Yeah, we as an organization, we will never, we are not a producer, or we are good at customizing things and about our knowledge, how to use technology for our clients, but we are not like a humanware or another company with all the other expertise. So that's not our core business.
Yeah, so you make things available for your clients, but if someone else says, I would like a heartbeat, is it possible? I mean, like your device, the heartbeat.
Yes, that would be possible, I think. Yeah. Erik, what do you think?
Yeah, but the heartbeat is also produced by another partner of ours. So that, I think that would be possible. But I think like a care organization as Bartimeus, we are not trying to make money, but we're trying to help clients. So that's also always the difficult between where you make one product, you would be like an open source. So that's the main thing we like to accomplish, that it's open source, and everyone who would like to use our technology should be able to use it. So that's one of our ways of exchanging all our knowledge.
Okay, thank you. We are nearing, it's now 17:44 here, so we're 1 minute away from the end of the session. So I will go ahead and close it by thanking each and one of you for being here. It was very good to hear your ideas on this topic, and I think I speak for all of the Suitcase consortium that this was very interesting for all of us. I want to remind everybody that this session ends here today. We will be back tomorrow for the last day of our symposium. But right now, you can, if you want, you can just stay in this session, and we will have a bit more of an informal mingle. The interpreters will not stay, yeah, everyone who wants to stay another maybe 10 or 15 minutes to chat a little bit more informally, please be welcome to stay. And otherwise, hopefully we will see you again tomorrow. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mirta, and everyone in the panel. Very interesting session. We learned quite a lot. And those of you who are attendees, If you wish to stay with us, please just stay in the room or maybe raise your hand if you can. And then we just move you to as panelists, and then we can have a chat. Arthur, can they raise their hands?
No, actually. But I will transfer everybody as
Yes, we transfer you to the main room so that you can talk and activate different things. But if you just don't want to be with us, you can leave now or you can leave after you have been moved. So that's fine. Oliver, you have something to say. Please go ahead, and I try to move people here.
I was just raising my hand in order to be transferred to the panel, but I think we have this now. So I still see 42 persons. Arthur, are you done with the transfer?
No.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm just transferring to.
I think Rita and Russ want to say something.
You can actually activate your cameras as well so we can see each other. It would be nice.
We have the camera on, but you can't see us.
We see you.
Ah, you can see now.
Yes, yes. I mean,
Okay,
everyone
now.
else can put on their cameras too, please, and then we can see each other.
Did you want to continue recording or?
Oh, you can stop recording.